This is a conversation no one wants to have, but we absolutely must. If you are a veteran, or if you know one, you understand the relationship with the Department of Veterans Affairs is complicated. It's supposed to be the bedrock, the promise kept, the safety net after service. But for far too many, that safety net feels frayed, full of holes, and often completely unreachable. We are seeing a critical, devastating breakdown of trust, and it's not just about slow paperwork anymore. It's systemic, it's deep, and if you rely on the VA, or if you plan to in the future, understanding why this trust is failing is essential because it directly impacts your future, your health, and your family's security. We're going to break down the 7 core reasons why the VA is losing the faith of the people it was created to serve, and crucially, what this reality means for you right now, today, as you navigate this labyrinthine system. Get ready, because the truth about the VA's current struggles is far more complex and concerning than the headlines suggest. The first, and perhaps most immediately frustrating reason veterans are walking away or simply giving up is the perpetual claims backlog and the culture of denial that fuels it. This isn't just about slow processing. This is about an institutional mechanism that seems fundamentally designed to delay, deflect, and default to no. When you leave the service, often injured, often suffering, the very first interaction you have with the VA is the claims process. This process is supposed to be straightforward, a recognition of the sacrifices you made. Instead, it becomes a multi-year psychological battle. You submit your claim, often a binder full of medical evidence, service records, and personal statements. And then you wait. The waiting is not benign. It is corrosive. It erodes your mental health. It impacts your ability to plan financially. It makes you feel like your service was a footnote, easily dismissed by a bureaucrat who has never worn the uniform. This backlog is not accidental. It is a structural failure that has persisted across multiple administrations, demonstrating a deep-seated inability or unwillingness to fix the core intake process. Why does the backlog persist? Because the system is incentivized to move slowly. Every claim approved is a long-term financial commitment. Every denial, even if temporary, saves the system money in the short term. This creates a culture where the easiest, safest choice for a claims processor who is overworked and under pressure is often to find a technicality, request more information, or simply deny the claim outright, pushing the burden of proof back onto the injured veteran. This is the definition of institutional betrayal. Think about the sheer psychological toll. A veteran submits a claim for a debilitating knee injury sustained during a deployment. They can barely walk. They wait 6 months, then a year. During that time, they are unable to work consistently. They are struggling to pay bills. Their physical pain is compounded by extreme financial anxiety. Finally, they get a letter, a dense, jargon-filled document that says, essentially, insufficient evidence. The letter doesn't offer help. It offers a roadmap to appeal, which involves hiring expensive representation or diving back into the abyss of bureaucracy. This isn't support. It's warfare by paperwork. The veteran is forced into an adversarial relationship with the very organization designed to help them. They are treated as claimants, not as patients or patriots. This process forces veterans to prove their pain, to justify their suffering, often reliving trauma during compensation and pension. C&P exams conducted by contractors who may spend 15 minutes reviewing a decade of service. These exams are often the hinge upon which a veteran's future financial stability rests, yet they are notoriously inconsistent. One examiner might be thorough and empathetic. The next might be rushed, dismissive, and focused solely on ticking a box that supports a denial. The inconsistency itself is a major factor in lost trust. Veterans compare notes, they read horror stories online, and they realize the outcome of their claim often feels less like justice and more like a lottery. This culture of denial forces veterans into a dependency on veteran service organizations, VSOs, or private attorneys, turning a promised benefit into a costly, drawn-out legal fight. And what does this mean for you, the veteran navigating this? It means you must treat every interaction with the VA claims process as a legal proceeding. You must meticulously document everything. You must assume they will lose your paperwork. You must assume they will misinterpret your records. You must prepare for the fight before you even submit the initial application. The VA is losing trust because it has successfully turned the act of seeking help into an exhausting, degrading, and often futile pursuit of justice. This initial hurdle sets the tone for the entire relationship, poisoning the well before the veteran even steps foot in a clinic for medical care. The claims backlog is not just a logistical problem, it is a moral failure that screams, "Your time and your suffering are not our priority." And when that message is delivered consistently, trust evaporates like water on hot concrete. This leads us directly to the second massive fissure in the foundation of trust: the crisis of access and timeliness in healthcare delivery. Even if you successfully navigate the claims process, the next hurdle is actually getting the care you need when you need it. The VA has faced decades of scandals related to wait times, and while there have been efforts at reform, like the community care program, the fundamental problem remains. Access is a postcode lottery, and specialized care is often a mirage. Imagine being approved for care only to be told the soonest available appointment with a specialist, say a cardiologist or an orthopedic surgeon, is 6 to 9 months away. For a condition that is painful, debilitating, or potentially life-threatening, this delay is unacceptable. It communicates to the veteran that their health is secondary to the VA's scheduling capacity. This isn't a matter of convenience. It's a matter of life quality, and sometimes life itself. The community care program, intended to alleviate this by allowing veterans to seek private sector care when the VA cannot meet specific timeliness or distance standards, has become its own bureaucratic nightmare. Veterans are often caught in a perpetual loop between the VA and the private provider. The VA authorizes the referral, but the private provider's billing system doesn't mesh with the VA's. Appointments are scheduled, then canceled, because authorization paperwork is missing. The veteran is left in the middle, suffering, while two massive healthcare systems point fingers at each other over administrative details. This failure to seamlessly integrate private care undermines the entire purpose of the reform. Furthermore, the geographic disparity in access is stark. If you live near a major metropolitan area with a large, well-funded VA medical center, your experience might be adequate. But if you are a rural veteran, you might have to drive 3 or 4 hours just for a routine primary care appointment. That travel time, that expense, that loss of a day's work, it all adds up, making the promised benefit functionally inaccessible. For many rural veterans, the choice becomes clear: either suffer the drive and the delays, or simply forego care altogether. This is not a choice that should exist in a system dedicated to those who served. The crisis of access is exacerbated by staffing shortages, particularly in specialized fields. The VA struggles to compete with private sector salaries and benefits, leading to high turnover and reliance on temporary or contract staff. When a veteran finally gets an appointment, they might see a different provider every time, leading to fragmented care, a lack of continuity, and the frustrating necessity of having to re-explain their complex medical history at every visit. This inconsistency breeds distrust. How can a veteran trust the diagnosis or the treatment plan if the provider treating them next month won't be the same person who made the initial assessment? The VA is losing trust because it promises comprehensive health care but delivers fragmented, delayed, and geographically biased access. This system forces veterans to become expert navigators of bureaucracy, constantly fighting for appointments, constantly verifying authorizations, and constantly advocating for themselves against a system that seems determined to wear them down. What this means for you is that you cannot rely on the VA to proactively manage your health needs. You must be aggressive. You must call repeatedly. You must track every referral and every authorization number. You must document every single cancellation and every wait time. Your health depends not just on the quality of the doctors, but on your ability to outmaneuver the administrative obstacles put in your path. The promise of timely care is often broken, leaving veterans feeling abandoned precisely when they are most vulnerable and need reliable, immediate intervention. This continuous struggle for basic access is a powerful and persistent source of institutional distrust, reinforcing the belief that the VA views its patients as burdens rather than honored beneficiaries. Moving deeper into the clinical failures, the third major source of lost trust is arguably the most heartbreaking: the mishandling of mental health and the failure of suicide prevention efforts. This is where the VA's failures have the most devastating, immediate, and final consequences. The mental health crisis among veterans is well documented, yet the VA's response remains tragically inadequate. Despite billions poured into mental health programs, the core issues of accessibility, quality, and continuity of care persist. The stigma surrounding mental health within the military and veteran community is slowly decreasing, but the institutional hurdles at the VA are still immense. A veteran struggling with severe post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, or suicidal ideation needs immediate, accessible, and consistent care. What they often encounter is a waiting list for an intake appointment, followed by a rotating cast of therapists. The continuity of care is critical for mental health treatment. Building trust with a therapist takes time, vulnerability, and consistency. When VA mental health staff turnover is high due to burnout, low pay, or administrative frustration, veterans are forced to restart the painful process of recounting their trauma to a new stranger every few months. This cycle is not therapeutic, it is re-traumatizing. Many veterans simply give up, concluding that the system is incapable of providing the stable support they desperately need. Furthermore, the specialized nature of trauma care is often lacking. Not all PTSD is the same. Combat trauma requires different therapeutic approaches than military sexual trauma, MST. Yet specialized programs are often underfunded or centralized, forcing veterans to travel long distances or wait even longer for appropriate care. The failure to adequately address MST is a particularly egregious breach of trust, leaving many female veterans feeling unsafe and unheard within the system. Perhaps the most public and tragic failure is in suicide prevention. The VA has the Veterans Crisis Line, a vital resource, but even that has faced periods of staffing shortages and reports of dropped calls or inadequate follow-up. When a veteran reaches out in their darkest moment, the response must be immediate, expert, and seamless. Failures in this critical area are unforgivable. Beyond the crisis line, the VA struggles with proactive intervention. Many veterans report feeling rushed during appointments, their mental health concerns minimized, or their medication managed haphazardly. There is a perceived disconnect between the institutional rhetoric of zero suicide and the operational reality on the ground, where staff are overwhelmed and resources are stretched thin. When a veteran loses a battle with their mental health, the entire veteran community feels that loss, and it chips away at the collective faith in the VA's ability to protect its own. The VA loses trust because it speaks the language of mental health awareness but fails to provide the consistent, specialized, and accessible resources necessary to back up those words. It feels like a performative effort rather than a genuine commitment to saving lives. What this means for you, the veteran, is that you must be your own most vigilant advocate, especially regarding mental health. You cannot assume the system will catch you if you fall. You must build your own external support network, whether through VSOs, private therapists, or community groups. If you are seeking mental health care at the VA, you must insist on continuity of care and demand specialized treatment if your needs are complex. You must recognize that the system is prone to fragmentation and burnout, and your safety might depend on your ability to push past the administrative inertia. The failure to safeguard the mental well-being of veterans is the most profound betrayal of the VA's mission, and it forces veterans to look elsewhere for the healing they earned. The fourth reason for the collapse of confidence is a painful reality check known as the quality of care disparity, or the VA's postcode lottery. If you talk to veterans across the country, you will hear two completely different stories about the VA. One veteran will praise their local facility, citing cutting-edge treatment and dedicated doctors. Another, perhaps just a state away, will describe dilapidated facilities, outdated equipment, and staff who seem indifferent or incompetent. This massive, inconsistent disparity in the quality of care is a fundamental flaw that destroys collective trust. Why should a veteran in Arizona receive demonstrably worse care than a veteran in Massachusetts, simply because of where they live? The VA is a single, national system, yet it operates like a patchwork quilt of independent, often undermanaged regional centers. The quality disparity manifests in several critical ways. First, infrastructure. While some VA hospitals are modern, state-of-the-art facilities, others are decades old, struggling with maintenance issues, broken equipment, and sometimes sanitation concerns. The physical environment impacts the perception of care. If a veteran walks into a facility that looks neglected, they immediately question the quality of the medical services provided within those walls. Second, staffing competency and consistency are highly variable. High-performing facilities attract and retain top medical talent, often due to their proximity to major medical universities. Lower-performing facilities struggle to compete, resulting in higher reliance on temporary staff or providers who may not have the same level of specialized expertise. This means a veteran's complex surgical outcome might depend entirely on the luck of the draw regarding which facility they are routed to. Third, the application of standardized protocols is inconsistent. While the VA has system-wide guidelines, the execution at the local level varies wildly. This can impact everything from prescription management to surgical follow-up. When veterans share their experiences online, the horror stories of misdiagnoses, prolonged suffering due to surgical errors, or near-fatal medication mix-ups, these anecdotes, even if isolated, are magnified because they confirm the underlying fear that the quality of care is unreliable. The VA loses trust because it cannot guarantee a consistent, high standard of medical excellence across all its facilities. The veteran community is small and interconnected. Bad news travels fast. If a VA center gains a reputation for poor quality, veterans in that region will go to extraordinary lengths, often incurring significant personal debt to seek private sector care, even if they are eligible for VA benefits. This choice to pay out of pocket for safety is the ultimate vote of no confidence in the system. For you, the veteran, this means you must be highly discerning about where you receive care. If you are near a facility with a poor reputation, you must aggressively pursue community care options, even if it means fighting the bureaucracy to get the referral. You must research the ratings and track records of your local VA medical center. You must treat your medical care as a collaboration, not a passive reception of services, questioning diagnoses and seeking second opinions, especially if something feels wrong. The quality disparity forces veterans to become consumers of healthcare, constantly evaluating the risk versus the benefit of relying on their local VA facility. This burden of constant vigilance should not fall on the shoulders of the patient, but the reality of the postcode lottery demands it. The fifth critical failure, and perhaps the most infuriating to veterans, is the chronic lack of accountability for systemic failures and misconduct. Scandals at the VA are not new. We have seen them surface repeatedly over the last 2 decades. Falsified wait times, misuse of funds, cover-ups of patient deaths, and senior executives abusing their power. What truly breaks trust is not the occurrence of the failure itself. All large organizations have failures, but the predictable, infuriating lack of meaningful consequences for those responsible. Time and time again, when a major scandal breaks, the veteran community watches as leaders are shuffled to different departments, given early retirements, or simply allowed to ride out the storm without true professional repercussions. This revolving door of unaccountable leadership sends a clear and cynical message. The system protects itself before it protects the veterans it serves. When wait times were exposed as being manipulated to meet performance metrics, resulting in veterans dying while waiting for care, the immediate public response was outrage. But what followed? A slow bureaucratic process of investigation that rarely resulted in firings at the top levels. Instead, the focus often shifts to punishing whistleblowers or mid-level managers, while the architects of the systemic failure remain insulated. This void of accountability is corrosive because it demonstrates that the institutional values are skewed. If the VA is serious about earning back trust, every failure that harms a veteran should result in a transparent and swift investigation leading to appropriate disciplinary action, up to and including termination, regardless of the seniority of the person involved. When veterans see a doctor or administrator whose incompetence led to patient harm simply transferred to a new facility, the faith in the entire oversight mechanism collapses. Furthermore, the lack of transparency surrounding investigations is a major issue. Often, the internal reviews are opaque, and the results are buried in complex reports that are difficult for the public and veterans to access or understand. This secrecy fuels suspicion. Veterans feel that the VA is constantly engaged in damage control rather than genuine reform. They see a system that prioritizes maintaining a positive public image over confronting its deep-seated operational flaws. This means that even when the VA promises change, the promise rings hollow because the people who presided over the failures are still in positions of power. The veteran community is highly sensitive to injustice, and the repeated display of institutional impunity is a profound insult. What does this accountability void mean for you? It means you must assume that reporting a negative experience or an instance of misconduct will be difficult, and the results may be unsatisfying. It means you must utilize external channels, your congressional representatives, the Office of the Inspector General, OIG, or media outlets, to force accountability, because relying solely on the VA's internal mechanisms often leads to disappointment. The VA loses trust because it has failed to create a culture where poor performance and ethical breaches are swiftly and publicly addressed, leaving veterans with the bitter taste of knowing that the people who failed them often face zero consequences for their actions. The sixth reason for the current crisis of confidence is tied directly to the promises of the future. The PACT Act implementation stumbles and the fear of system overload. The Sergeant First Class Heath Robinson. Honoring our promise to address Comprehensive Toxics Act, or PACT Act, was hailed as a monumental victory for veterans exposed to burn pits and other toxins. It promised to expand eligibility for benefits and health care to millions of veterans who had previously been denied due to the VA's restrictive approach to presumptive conditions. The hope was immense. This was supposed to be the moment the VA made good on decades of neglect. However, the reality of implementation has been fraught with bureaucratic snags, delays, and a palpable fear that the system is simply not equipped to handle the tidal wave of new claims. The initial rollout involved confusing communication about eligibility dates and required documentation. While the VA has processed a significant number of claims, the sheer volume has begun to put immense strain on the already struggling claims processing system. Veterans who submit claims under the PACT Act often find themselves waiting months, sometimes over a year, for a decision. This delay is particularly cruel because many of the PACT Act beneficiaries are suffering from aggressive, life-threatening cancers and respiratory illnesses. For them, time is literally running out. The slow pace of processing, combined with the VA's historical tendency toward denial, creates massive anxiety. Veterans worry that even with the law on their side, the bureaucracy will find a way to stall or deny their claims until it's too late. Furthermore, the PACT Act requires the VA to provide health care to a massive new cohort of veterans. This influx exacerbates the existing crisis of access and timeliness. Reason 2. The VA was already struggling to staff hospitals and manage wait times. Now it must absorb millions of new patients. Veterans already enrolled in the system fear that their care will be further delayed or diluted as resources are stretched thin to accommodate the new demand. This isn't a failure of intent, it's a failure of capacity planning. The legislation was necessary, but the infrastructure to support it was not adequately prepared. The VA is losing trust because it delivered a massive promise, a moral victory, but is struggling to deliver the operational reality. The contrast between the celebratory signing of the bill and the current reality of waiting lists and bureaucratic confusion is a devastating blow to veteran morale. What this means for you, whether you are a PACT Act claimant or an existing VA patient, is that you must prepare for significant delays across the board. If you are a new claimant, you must be exceptionally thorough in your application, anticipating every possible point of bureaucratic friction. If you are an existing patient, you need to be proactive in scheduling your appointments far in advance and aggressively utilizing community care options if the VA wait times become untenable. The PACT Act is a necessary step toward justice, but its implementation reveals the fragility of the VA system, demonstrating that while Congress can pass laws, the agency often lacks the agility and capacity to execute them effectively, leading to prolonged suffering and renewed distrust among the very people the law was meant to help. Finally, the seventh, often overlooked but deeply felt reason for the collapse of veteran trust is the erosion of confidentiality and the dehumanization of the bureaucratic machine. In an age of constant data breaches and digital insecurity, the VA's handling of veteran data has become a serious concern. Veterans entrust the VA with their most sensitive information, combat trauma details, mental health diagnoses, financial records, and Social Security numbers. The VA has suffered multiple, high-profile data breaches over the years, exposing millions of veterans to identity theft and privacy violations. When a veteran receives a letter informing them that their personal information may have been compromised, it's not just an inconvenience, it's a terrifying breach of a sacred trust. It reinforces the feeling that the VA is too large, too clumsy, and too poorly managed to be a secure steward of their most private lives. Beyond the security failures, the sheer scale of the VA bureaucracy contributes to a profound sense of dehumanization. Veterans often feel they are not treated as individuals who served their nation, but as case numbers, claim files, or diagnostic codes. The process of accessing benefits and care is often impersonal, conducted through automated phone trees, standardized forms, and exchanges with staff who may not have the time or training to engage with the complex human story behind the paperwork. This feeling of being reduced to a statistic is deeply alienating. It contrasts starkly with the camaraderie and human connection found in military service. The military is about unit cohesion and personal responsibility. The VA often feels like the opposite: massive, faceless, and indifferent. This dehumanization is particularly acute during the C&P exams we discussed earlier. Being forced to quantify trauma, to put a percentage on pain, or to have your entire service history reduced to a series of check marks is degrading. When a veteran is asked by a claims processor, "What is your claim number?" before they are asked, "How are you doing?" the message is clear: the paperwork matters more than the person. The VA loses trust because it fails the basic human test of empathy and personalized care. It treats the veteran community not as a collection of individual heroes, but as a mass of claimants to be processed efficiently, or inefficiently, as the case may be. What this means for you is that you must be extremely cautious with your personal information. Be vigilant about identity theft and always question why certain data is being requested. More importantly, you must refuse to be treated as merely a number. When interacting with the VA, insist on human connection. Bring a friend or family member to appointments to ensure your voice is heard and your story is respected. The fight against dehumanization is a necessary part of navigating any massive bureaucracy, but it is especially painful when that bureaucracy is supposed to represent the highest honor of a grateful nation. The cumulative effect of these 7 core failures, the endless claims backlog, the inaccessible care, the failed mental health support, the quality disparity, the lack of accountability, the PACT Act growing pains, and the pervasive dehumanization, is a system standing on the brink of a trust crisis. The VA is not merely struggling with logistics, it is struggling with its soul. It is failing to deliver on the fundamental promise made to every man and woman who raised their right hand. For the veteran, this reality demands a proactive, aggressive, and highly informed approach to their own care and benefits. You cannot afford to be passive. You must document everything, question everything, and build external support systems that can catch you when the VA system inevitably falters. The responsibility for navigating this broken system has tragically fallen back onto the shoulders of the veterans themselves. The VA must move beyond incremental reform and embrace radical transparency and accountability if it ever hopes to repair the profound erosion of faith. Until then, the veteran community will continue to look at the VA not as a steadfast partner, but as a necessary yet deeply flawed adversary in the ongoing battle for their health and dignity. This is the reality. This is what it means for you. Stay vigilant, stay connected, and never stop advocating for the care you earned.